Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Jazmen Jafar. For those of you that don't know me, I do OnlyFans. I'm a lawyer. OnlyFans plus lawyer equals 304 lawyer. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any content because I don't think there's any other 304 lawyers, at least not out in the open. So you don't want to miss it. Today, I'm really excited to talk about this because this is something that I discovered, I want to say 2019. While I was in law school, I heard of the term incel, and I didn't know what it was. I think an ex-boyfriend told me about it, and I was like, what is this? And he's like, oh, it's like this group of people online, and they're involuntary celibates. He showed me the forums and the things that they say, and I became super obsessed because it's just my personality, and me and my whole group of friends became super obsessed. We were like in the forums, we made like accounts, everything. But I remember at the time, I was like, I wonder what research has been done on this. And I was looking up, and there had been very little research done on incels back in like 2018, 2019. Now it seems like this movement has been getting more exposure, probably because of some of the offshoots of this movement and like the manosphere as a whole. And I would put this like as one category under the manosphere. They have been getting more attention, and it's been interesting for me because obviously incels pretty much had nothing to do with my life back in 2019 when I was a lawyer. But now that I do OnlyFans and, I've been engaging with the manosphere is heavy in my comments. I feel like, wow, like a lot of the stuff that I was seeing, a lot of the ideology that I learned then is bleeding out into what I'm seeing online now. And so I was like, let me look and see what research there actually is, right? Because just reading forums or hearing about it is not the same thing. And I'm really interested. This has been something that I've been thinking about a lot. Like, okay, so these people are a thing. What can we do about it? Is it just something that's just going to exist? Or are there things that we can do as a society to help this group of people? Okay, so definitions. What is an incel? Incel stands for involuntary celibates. When we talk about how many there are, it completely depends on how you define it, right? Like, how do you define sexless men, right? If you go into most incel forums, they have no sex. They're virgins, and many of them have never even kissed a girl. So if you're taking that group of people, it's a very, very small portion of society. The amount of virgins past the age of 25, which seems to be the average age for an incel, it's like mid-20s, is less than 2%. And yeah, most people have had like at least some form of intimacy, a girlfriend. If you're just looking at who isn't having as much sex as they like, right, then that number is going to be much bigger. Even if you're looking at who didn't have sex in the past year, the most recent data shows that 14.92% of men have had no sexual partners in 2022. That's including everybody. Maybe there's not a lot of men, but there are some men who choose not to as well, go celibate. So it depends on how you define it. But when we're talking about the history of the term, it was actually a woman who came up with the term incel, and this was in the late 90s. And she actually had an online project where people of all genders could share their experiences or frustrations with having issues having sex. Interestingly, now most people agree, or most people in the community at least agree, that there's no such thing as a female incel. So what the movement has become is completely outside of what she had intended. So that's how it started. And then it started getting picked up in the 4chan world, started getting traction there. And there's a big overlap in members, which is kind of unsurprising. There was also a huge incel subreddit that was banned in 2017. I think they had 40,000 members at the time. Reddit banned them, stating that content that encourages, glorifies, incites, or calls for violence or physical harm against an individual or a group of people is not allowed, which is why it was banned. What the incel, movement online is characterized by is hostility. There is a lot of violence in these forums, a ton of misogyny in these forums, and I'm not saying that's representative of the whole community, but they are the loudest. I think I read somewhere that it's like 10% of the members that are doing most of the chatting online in these forums, and there's still a lot of forums up. If you go into these forums, you're going to see wild fucking shit. Like, you're going to see crazy fucking shit. But it is important to remember, because even I fell into the trap at first. I was like, oh my God, this is just how all incels are. When you actually look at the data, most incels aren't super violent. But the ones that are violent and the ones that are hateful and the ones that spew out this really crazy rhetoric, almost like performatively insane rhetoric, are the loudest. And these forums are not all bad, right? Some ways they're good, in some ways they're bad. They're bad in the sense that they keep pushing this narrative. They do have the ability to radicalize people. It definitely meets like the three ends of radicalization: need, narrative, network. It does provide a lot of that. I've read so much stuff where somebody's like, hey, maybe I can get a girlfriend or something. And everyone's like, no, fuck you. It's over. Like that's a very common thing that happens or delete yourself, delete everybody. That's a very common thing that you see on this platform. But at the same time, there was a study, 58% of incels surveyed in the study indicated that incel forums made them feel less lonely, with even greater proportions reporting a sense of belonging. I think that was around 70%, and feeling understood, 75%. So in some sense, it provides people who are struggling with the community, right? Just like that's what happens on the internet. In some ways, it's good. It gives people a chance to not feel alone. But in other ways, there can be really dangerous and harmful narratives that spread in these communities. And I would say that has definitely happened with this movement. So yeah, if you guys go on these forums, you're going to see really insane stuff. I have like literally dissected all the lingo. They really hold up a few mass shooters that identified with the movement, namely Elliot Rodgers. And so literally, if you go on these forums and you see the term going ER, what it stands for is going Elliot Rodgers, shooting people and going out, with a bang, as they call it. But again, this is not the majority, and most, this idea that incels are extra violent seems like there's mixed data on that. The hard part is that a lot of mass shooters do fall into this prototype of like lonely white young man who doesn't do well in the romance department, as well as many other departments in their lives. So that doesn't necessarily mean that they identify with the movement, but sometimes they do. So that's that. Then this is all part of the greater manosphere. So the red pillars, pickup artists, MGTOW, men going their own way. And what the incels really believe is they believe that there is a hierarchy in the dating market. So what they believe is that the Chads and the Stacys are at the very top, and they have the best selection. And then the normies take the biggest chunk in the middle. And because women are hypergamous, they go for men like above them, which leaves the bottom percentage of men, but not the bottom percentage of women, with nothing. They very much believe that women are hypergamous. They very much believe in the 80-20 rule, which is that 20% of men are getting 80% of the women. It's the Pareto principle. It's been debunked many times. You guys can look that up. I've debunked it on certain platforms, so it's not true, but this is what they believe. If you're looking at characteristics, they found that, mid-20s, typically in the West, so North America, Europe seems to be where most of them congregate. But contrary to popular belief, now that they've researched it more, there's the stereotype that it's like an angry white kid. And I think like at least like a third are, from the studies I've seen, are not white. So it is an ethnically diverse group, but it is still something that is strong in the West and not in other parts of the world. Okay, so what do we know about incels, who they are, and what they're dealing with? So a lot of research has found, unsurprisingly, that they deal with really intense self-esteem issues. So there's evidence linking also your perceived value in the mating marketplace and how that affects your self-esteem. Unsurprisingly, incels have a very low perception of their value as a mate in the dating world. It also is linked to how misogynistic you are. So these men, they want women, they want relationships, but then when they feel rejected by that group, well, then it's like, well, I hate them. I don't like them anyway, right? Think of like kids in like, grade school, where it's like you want to be friends with them, but they don't want to be friends with you. And now you dislike them. You think they're bad. You talk shit about them. There is research, and I'm going to send you this because I think it's good to put up, that talks about how this is the case also when it comes to men and their perceived status in the dating marketplace and the way they treat women and their views on women. And the lower you perceive your status in the dating marketplace, the more you hold misogynistic views about women. So I think that's pretty interesting. They have much higher rates of depression, like double, anxiety, they have lower life satisfaction. There has been some major, I think there was a 2019 and a 2020 survey, and they both showed around the same thing. 74.1% say they experience anxiety, stress, or emotional distress in a constant manner. So really high levels of loneliness, a lot of suicidal thoughts, many of them are suicidal, like a really alarming amount are. And I would say a lot of people focus on, incels are so dangerous because of the danger they pose to other people, which I'm not saying that's not true. There have been cases of that. Elliot Rogers, there was that guy in Toronto who ran over people with a car. When you read some of their posts, the ones that are posting, it can be really scary. But the greatest risk they usually pose is to themselves, because most of them, the worst thing they're going to do is delete themselves. And there are high rates of that in this community. I thought this was really interesting. Incels report being more sensitive to rejection and experience a greater fear of being single than the general population. And I thought there was a really interesting study that looked at this, and they found that, incels experience more feelings of loneliness and less social support than non-incel men. Both of these variables were associated with multiple mental and relational health issues that incels also scored more highly on. Further, incels reported using more solitary and problematic coping mechanisms. These results suggest that incels may be missing a key buffer in sheltering them from the adverse effects of romantic rejection. So this was, pretty unsurprising to me, right? What you're seeing with incels is that they have a lot of risk factors, and they don't have a lot of protective factors that prevent them from going down this rabbit hole. So it's not just the romantic rejection, but it's affecting them more because they don't have community, they don't have many friends, they're pretty lonely, and they cope in harmful ways, like going on the internet into these forums and seeing everybody hate life and hate themselves. They have like sections on there. There's cope or rope fuel, which are things that they see that are bad, that make them want to rope. And then they have cope, which are things that are making them feel better. And unfortunately, in these forums, the things that make them feel better is the misery of normies or other people. So I remember looking at it when COVID happened. They were super happy about COVID. They were really happy that normies would now have to experience what they experience, which is loneliness, not being able to go out, not being able to see your friends and whatever because they don't have friends. So it is a really toxic place. They also, research indicates, and I think this is a big one, that incels have a unique tendency to adopt a victimhood identity. So they showcase an external locus of control. And what that means is that they believe, more so than the general population, that their problems are caused by things outside of themselves that they have no control over, right? An internal locus of control is, I have control over this. And this is where I would say, like, if you're going to think about the pills, the black pill versus the red pill, they have some overlapping beliefs, but the red pill is like, okay, you have the power to fix this. And black pillars don't think that. However, both of them have at least somewhat of an external locus of control when it comes to why things are this way, right? So with incels, we see that they focus a lot more so on things like evolution. They believe that physical attractiveness is super important. The majority of them identify with the black pill, which puts things like attractiveness, things you can't control, at a higher than things you can control, right? There was a study that found that incels significantly overestimated the importance of physical attractiveness and financial prospects to women, and underestimated the importance of intelligence, kindness, and humor. So they have a very distorted view of relationships, similar to the red pill. It's not actually the way things are, and it's interesting because these studies pretty much confirm it, right? That these people are like, no, this is what women care about, and it's not what women care about. And that distorted view is also fueling these issues and this hatred. They also believe that feminism is a big contributor to this. I would say this is pretty true, I want to say, across the manosphere. So they believe less stringent gender roles, women entering the workforce, and socially enforced monogamy. Since those things have changed, that basically women getting this power and being able to choose men instead of just needing men is what's causing this for them. And interestingly, just by the fact that this is typically a movement seen in the West where people are free and women are getting more power, that power is threatening to these men. Super interesting study. I don't remember if you guys remember this. There was a study they did on Halo 3, the video game, which I've never played, but it tests whether skill performance impacted frequency of like negative comments towards both men and women. And men who performed worse in the game were more likely to speak negatively towards the women playing, which this kind of goes into that thing I was saying earlier about the misogyny being associated with where you think your status is. So the evolutionary explanation that the researchers, posited was that a female-directed aggression was that men who performed worse were more likely to speak negatively towards the women playing, whereas men who were good at the game actually didn't seem that threatened by men. So the evolutionary explanation of female-directed aggression that was posited by the researchers is that because low-status men have the most to lose by this hierarchy change, that women were extra threatening to them because they were really threatening their position. And I find this to be definitely the case in pretty much the entire manosphere. It does seem to take in men who aren't doing very well in their lives in a multitude of ways, and for the most part. Or men that have a lot of insecurity, etc. They are like, well, no, women can't have this power because women having this power is a direct threat to me. They're also, interestingly, they find that these men incel score pretty high on sociosexuality. They have high sex drive. They want many partners. And this could be because they're repressed. They've been deprived. So they're very sex crazed. And this is something I've noticed even in the interactions with myself. I know I'm an OnlyFans star, but like everything to these guys has to do with sex. Like everything. Like if a guy says hi to you, they think that every single thing, that any interaction between men and women is driven by sex solely. Nobody can have friends of the other gender. Sex isn't something that's important, but is, one of the many things that defines interactions in society, and especially between genders, but it is all that there is. Everything is all about sex. Anytime somebody is writing a comment under my post, it's because they want to get laid. If I say, hey, 2 + 2 = 4, and someone's like, yeah, they're like, she's not going to fuck you, bro. Like, they think that everybody is just focused and hyper obsessed with this because they are hyper obsessed with this. They also, research has found that they have a lack of empathy, that greater lack of empathy than the normal population. They have this kind of revenge mentality of like, well, no one cares about us. Nobody cares about me. So I'm not going to care about you. And kind of this very angry world. And they believe that they are morally superior. Like they think that the rest of us, normie culture, is what's immoral, and their beliefs are what's moral. And obviously when you get into a group of people and you have that group think, those type of views are definitely going to grow. Also, interestingly, more incels than the typical population live with their parents. They don't have jobs. They have lower levels of education. More so, like, there's a greater percentage of them that has a high school diploma or less compared to the average population. So again, it seems like the men in this movement is, when you're looking at their characteristics, like things like height, they're actually average height. They're not like Quasimodo, all of them, like, sitting in their basements. A lot of them, the things that they think are affecting their dating prospects, like their height, I think over half of them were taller than 5'9", at least in that study that I read. But they believe that no, the reason that it's just because my jawline isn't strong, and it's because I'm not tall enough. And it's just like a cocktail of, okay, you don't have friends, you don't have good job prospects, you don't have a community, you don't have support, you're lonely, you're not doing well with women. And it is all of those things that are contributing to you being in the predicament that you are, but you're going to focus on those things that are out of your control, and you're going to have a villain, which is women, society, feminism, and you're going to play victim. And that's what most of these people do. And this is not me trying to be not sympathetic to them, because I do feel for these people, especially those of them that aren't violent and don't spew out hatred on the internet, because I think there are a lot of them. But it just seems like a really unhealthy place to be. Some of the things I think, like the same things that can help incels, I think are the same things that can help men in general. So I do spend a lot of time combating the rhetoric of the red pill or whoever I'm debating on relationship dynamics, because they're wrong. They're quite frankly wrong on a lot of the things they say. I think they make the problem worse in a lot of ways by hyper focusing on those old traditional views of masculinity, which are just no longer going to be able to be upheld in the West again. Well, they can, but they're going to have to work with that backdrop of female empowerment. That's just we're not going to reverse the clock. We're not going to go back. We're not going to go back to a time where, women couldn't work and they got married when they were super young to one man. And that's just not the way society is going to work. So I think having different domains of status presented to men other than alpha, wealth, strength, height, I think that can be really good to say like, hey, you can find purpose in being a caregiver. You can find purpose in other ways besides these traditional macho ways, because those things are becoming less attractive to women, right? Because as women can take care of themselves, you see that they don't actually care as much. Things like brute strength and lots of money, those are still attractive to women. I'm not going to say that it's not. But if your goal is to have a long-term, happy, healthy relationship, a lot of women aren't looking for those things anymore to the extent that they were, right? When it comes to education, when it comes to socioeconomic status, when it comes to the amount of money you make, we're seeing that that trend is reversing, and women, as they're able to take care of themselves, care less about their partners making more than them. They care more. What we're seeing is women are starting to care more about emotional intelligence, support, having an actual partner rather than having a ATM machine. And I think that the message we should be spreading to men is not to just hyper focus on those things that are just not as important in modern society. Not saying that they're bad, not saying that you shouldn't try to be successful or you shouldn't try to be at the gym, but that if your identity is contingent on those things, and if there's men struggling and you're like, oh, if you make more money and if you get bigger muscles without fixing all these other things, then you're going to be good, and it's a losing game. I also think that this is a part of the reason for, I don't even know if the incel movement is growing or if we just are focusing on it more. We have a big loneliness problem. We've been having it for a while. People report being more lonely. We've lost a lot of the sense of community as religion has become less and less followed, and social media, right? So the basement dwellers who sit online, and it's not a healthy lifestyle. That doesn't mean the internet's bad. It doesn't mean social media is bad. It doesn't mean any of these things are bad. But I think if as a society we could focus on getting outside, I hate to say it, touching grass, finding real friends, having hobbies that get you outside, having a community, I think that alone could help a lot of these men. One of my biggest critiques of the manosphere is that they focus. I mean, they say, like, all these shows are like, oh no, we spend a lot of time telling men to clean their rooms and get ready. 90% of your show is about women. Am I wrong on that? Like, most of their show is focused on this is how you win with women. Women, 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 women. It's not super like, I mean, I don't know how many times Fresh and Fit has showed them their workout routine. I wish some of these podcasts and some of this advice to men, right? Because there's this vacuum, and then people like Andrew Tate in the manosphere come in and they focus on, like I said, those hyper masculine traits. And they're like, all you need is more of this. Well, the world has changed. Those things are not as valuable. It's not as valuable to be able to throw a spear now as it used to be. It's really not as valuable to be able to provide for your entire family, because women a lot of times can provide for themselves depending on what class you're in, and most people tend to make a cross. So I wish that they would focus on, hey, here's how to have more friends. Here's how to be a better friend. I feel like so often we're so focused on relationships. This is something that bothers me so much. Like, and I know this is kind of unrelated now, but when I get people like, oh, what's your relationship status? Oh, do you have a boyfriend? Do you have this? Are you married? And it's like, why does no one ever ask, hey, how are your friendships? Because friendships are just as important, if not more, than relationships are. You know, I've made this analogy before. Your life should be like a pie, and you should have your hobbies, your career, your interests, your family, your friends, and romantic partners. And so many of this movement, because that's where their frustration is their frustration is, oh, I don't have any romantic partners. I'm struggling in this department. But they're also struggling in all of these departments. Their whole pie is fucked. And then people come in and they're like, oh no, this is how you're good with women. Just be more macho and go hit the gym and blah, blah, blah. And I wish more of our advice would look at the whole thing and be like, okay, but here's also what we can do with education. I think we have a major issue with men in education right now. The education gap has reversed. I think there are things we can do. I've talked before about Richard Reeves. I think he's a really great book of Boys and Men that talks about this, how to get men into better wages in the workforce, men having community, friends, people that they can depend on, people they can be vulnerable with. I think one thing we can do is focus on those aspects of someone's life, because usually if those things are at least going well, you don't fall into this insane depression and these horrible outcomes don't occur in the same way. So let me know what you guys think below, what your thoughts on incels are, what you think we can do about it. Are they seen as like an unsympathetic group to you? Because sometimes they can be that way, especially the loud ones on the internet. But I think we all have to remember that these people are struggling, and the ones that are loud and vicious and angry are not representative of the whole group. And even those ones that are that way are doing so because they're hurting. So yeah, let me know what you think. Like, subscribe, follow Thoughts with Thoughts with my girl Naomi. You guys should follow her as well. That's more lighthearted stuff. And let me know below what other kind of topics you want me to cover.